What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another video. And on this one we are going to be talking about distribution centers. I have divided the video into 5 parts, so we are going to be looking at what the distribution center is, what the roles are within the business, what progression will be available to you, the pay and benefits, and obviously what would you be doing inside the warehouse. For the sake of making this video as short as I can possibly make it without leaving any essential information on the side, I have put my experience and the companies that I worked for, which is what I'm going to be basing this video on. I have put that in the description. I also want to mention that everything that I will say in here is based on experience and experience only. Obviously, its purpose is to help you when it comes to research. It helps you obviously have all the information you need if you are thinking about applying for a job in logistics. But mainly simply because ever since Brexit has been a bit of a nightmare to recruit people when it comes to warehousing, and retention levels are through an all-time low, I would say, or at least they were a few years ago. And obviously COVID came in and accelerated that as well. Also, something that I notice as someone who interviews quite a lot of people is that the nervousism is actually quite high. And I think it can be a bit overwhelming for somebody who's coming to a logistics center for the first time and sees that massive building, and as soon as they walk through the door, just noise everywhere, all kinds of people, all kinds of machinery going around. So essentially the video is to help you relax so that you can have as much information as possible before going in. And hopefully it will help you do a much better interview, answer the questions a little bit more at ease. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. As I mentioned in the description, the distribution centers that we are going to be talking about are revolving around the food retailing world. Although majority of retail businesses, they tend to have their own distribution centers and they sort of follow the same pattern, which we can talk about in a different video. But in this one, we are going to be talking about the likes of Asda, Morrison, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, and obviously your two biggest discounters, which is Lidl and Aldi. And then we also have like let's say a bonus, which is Co-op, which I worked for about a year as well. They all kind of follow the same pattern, although the likes of Asda and Tesco, they tend to have a bit of a different layout when it comes to their distribution centers, but we are going to be covering that as well in the video. So what is a distribution center? Essentially, a distribution center is the connection of all corners of the business. It's the connection between head office, regional offices, and the store, and it's also the main connection for any suppliers and manufacturers of the products that you see on the shelves. So the best way to describe what a distribution center looks like on the inside is think about it as an amplified version of your kitchen. So if you were to go and divide your kitchen, you would probably end up with 4+1 departments in it. So what I mean by that is very simple. In your kitchen, you'd probably divide it into 4 sections. At first, you would have your ambient products or your cupboard products, anything that can be stored at ambient temperature or the house temperature in general. This will be your chocolate, your toiletries, your cleaning products, your cereals, tins, so on and so forth. You then have your fridge, which is temperature controlled, or what in the warehouse world we call a TCW, which is a temperature controlled warehouse, which is usually from 0 to 2 degrees, and this applies as well in the warehouse. You would be working on a 0 to 2 degrees environment, and it's usually separated by 1 to 2 doors, depending. You would then have obviously the freezer, which most retail companies actually tend to outsource that to third-party companies to have it picked by them. But the likes of Aldi and Lidl, they actually do their own picking. So you would be working in an environment of anywhere from -18 to 25 degrees. Usually it's in between, so you'd be working on a -23 degrees. Obviously you'd have the suit and so on and so forth. And obviously you would have as well your recycling or your waste, which is where your waste goes, where your recycling goes. You also have a section like that in the warehouse. So that is the 4 departments. You'd have the ambient, the chilled, the freezer, and then the recycling. So the +1 that I mentioned is none other than your bananas. They are stored in their particular space. They have their own temperature, their own environment. They are packaged separately from everything else. And I'm not entirely sure the reason as to why, but I know that they are together with some other type of fruit. The other type of fruit becomes contaminated, so they tend to separate bananas from everything else, and obviously they put them in very rigid boxes and very rigid plastic as well to keep it unspoiled. So that is pretty much it. That's what a warehouse or distribution center sort of looks like for the likes of Lidl, Aldi, Co-op, and Sainsbury. They tend to have everything into this one massive building. They've got the ambient, and then they have the chilled, and inside the chilled they have banana section, and then they have a freezer section as well. The likes of Asda and Tesco tends to be a little bit different because their operation is so much bigger. They tend to have one warehouse for their 2 major sections, which is chilled and ambient. So for example, if you are in the Bristol area, you would know that in Avon Avonmouth, which is the industrial area of Bristol, more or less. Tesco and Asda both have their chilled warehouses on that, together with their recycling centre and their freezer sections. And then across the bridge in Wales, in Chepstow, Asda has their own ambient warehouse, and in Mager, Tesco has their ambient warehouse as well. I think that the only reason that they are separated is just because their operation is so massive and the variety of products that they've got is so big that they require that much space, so they separated everything. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for the point number one. If you do have any questions, please just do drop a comment and I'll try and come back to you as soon as I can. Moving on to point number two. Within the role section, or let's say the titles of the jobs that you're going to have, it's similar to most businesses. It goes on a pyramid scheme. You've got a warehouse hygienist or warehouse cleaner, a warehouse operative or a warehouse picker, depending on the business that you're going into. You then have a warehouse service manager or a warehouse team manager. They are the same thing basically. You then have someone called a warehouse shift manager, which is basically the one in charge of the shift as a whole. You then have an operations manager for some warehouses, or you would have a deputy warehouse manager, and then you have a general manager or a warehouse manager on top of that, and then so on and so forth when it comes to head office directors and so on. Within the warehouse hygienist role, I just want to mention that a lot of the companies actually delegate these or outsource this to third-party companies. Co-op used to do that with a company called Arcane, if I'm not incorrect. And I know for a fact that Asda and Tesco, they outsource their entire recycling center, which is a good thing in my opinion, to a company called GXO. They basically provide the building and GXO provides the labor for them to basically do the recycling part of it. But I think, at least Lidl, I know for sure that they do their own recycling, or at least they used to do it, and they process their own returns, and Aldi as well, if I'm not incorrect. So when it comes to a warehouse operative role, I just wanted to dive into a little bit. You have two variances within the role. You've got the warehouse worker / warehouse operative role, which means that you would be assigned, you would have a specific section of the warehouse assigned to you for that day on the worksheet. And then we have what we call a warehouse operative skilled role, which is basically a similar role to the warehouse operative worker, except that on top of that, you have training or specific training to drive specific trucks, like reach truck / FLT truck or a counterbalance. This certificate can be acquired in-house by the business once they want to invest in you for that specific training, or you can acquire it externally and then apply for a skilled role directly. So now moving on to point number three, pay and benefit. The good thing about struggling with recruitment and retention levels being so low is that in the last 3 years there has been an exponential increase when it comes to pay rates per hour and premium rates per hour in the logistics world. So when it comes to pay and benefits, majority of the warehouse, they pay and apply the benefits more or less the same way. I think that the ones that pay the least would be probably Co-op, at least from the brands that I've mentioned on the beginning of the video. Co-op is probably the lowest paid basic rate of the entire brand, and I think the one that pays the highest is actually Tesco. However, Tesco can be slightly bit deceiving because they pay on a 4-weekly basis, which means you get paid 13 times of the year rather than the 12, which means you get paid slightly bit less per cycle because you would get paid for 4 weeks rather than the 30/31 days that you're supposed to get paid for. But you then have a month at some point of the year that you get paid twice, so that's the benefit of that. But they do have the highest basic pay that I found, at least from the brands that I've worked in before. So the majority of warehouses operate under a basic rate that they would pay you, and which would be your actual salary. And then what they do is they apply premiums to the more unsocial hours that you would do for them. That's obviously up to the company's discretion. There is absolutely no law that states that you gotta get paid more for the unsocial hours that you're getting paid for. I'm not sure about night shift. There might be some law around that, but I'm not entirely sure. But what tends to happen is if you are doing what they call a weekday shift, which tends to be a morning shift, anywhere from 6 till 2 / 7 till 3, you get paid your absolute basic pay rates. And if you look at the screen now, I will actually pull the pay rates for Tesco's in Avonmouth. And as you can see, the pay rate for a weekday is a 12.86, which equals to something like the average salary in the UK, which equals to something like 25,000 / 26,000 pounds a year, which is basically the average salary in the UK. And as you can see, the salary tends to increase when you're doing overtime. So if there is overtime available, the business will apply an X amount of money to that overtime. So if you do overtime during the day, you get paid 19.29 an hour, which is very good. If you do then a weeknight on a weekly basis, you get paid 16.7 an hour, which is a very, very good salary, which equals to something like £31,000 a year, which is way above average and is actually a good salary in the UK, something like £2,100 a month after tax, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously, as you can see, you've got Saturdays, Sundays premiums, you've got then Sunday night premium and Saturday night premiums, you've got bank holidays and bank holiday night premiums, and then you've got the respective overtime rates for the obviously the type of shit that you're doing. So obviously, as you can see, if you're working all nights, you get paid 16.07 an hour, and then if you do overtime, you get £22.50 an hour, a very good salary. And because of the issue with recruitment and staff, majority of the warehouses, they actually do offer regular overtime, especially now coming on to Christmas, which is the busiest period for the warehousing in general. So now would be the time to apply for a job like this and get applications for that overtime rate. So as you can see, that's pretty much it when it comes to pay and premium benefits. Obviously, I'm not going to go through every single one of them because they, as in the business that I work for, because they follow more or less the same sort of pay and sort of premium rates. So I won't be talking about that. So when it comes to benefits, so it depends on the company itself. There doesn't tend to be a lot of benefits, I'll be completely honest, depending on the warehouse that you work in. So when it comes to benefits, I think in terms of warehousing, it's very basic. It's the same across the board. Majority of the warehouses, they offer the same sort of benefits. Obviously, because you're working in a warehouse and there's a certain degree of danger, they offer life insurance cover when it comes to working in the warehouse. So you work-based life insurance. So if something were to happen to you, they would contact basically any emergency contacts that you've got, and you would get paid, I believe, 3 times your salary. So if you're earning 30k a year, you get paid, your family would get paid 3 times that amount to, I guess, make up for the fact that you had a life-changing accident at work. And then they offer, obviously, the cycling to work scheme if you wanted to invest on a bike and come to work in a bicycle, which tends to be a very weird benefit to me because the majority of these places, they are in industrial areas, which is away from residential areas. So still quite a bit to cycle to, or in remote places because they are so big. So this one doesn't make much sense to me, but it's still there if you are interested in it. You obviously have as well colleague discounted cards, which is in Tesco used to offer, I think, 10 to 15%, and I think they used to around Christmas get something like 20 to 25% discounts on all Tesco shopping. And then obviously you get the 22 days holidays plus the bank holidays, which equals to something like 28 to 30. Some warehouses, they offer you like an external company that you can then get benefits from, discounts here and there, gym membership discounts and things like that, but it won't be anything extravagant. So when it comes to benefits, it is quite poor in a warehouse world, but there are warehouses that offer you other things like Costco memberships and Booker's memberships, so that's a good thing. So when it comes to benefits, I think that's pretty much all I can say. So moving on to point number 4, and probably the last point of the video because it is quite long already. So when it comes to progression, it is quite difficult for me to let you know what the best course of action is because the positions of management inside the warehouses tend to be filled up for the longest time. So for a role to become available, one of the things has to happen. Either the person has moved on to a different role, has retired, or the warehouse has just expanded and there is a bigger need for management in general. So that would be the only way that I see progression happening within the business. However, if you are wanting to progress from the department that you are in, let's say that you are in assembly / picking boxes up and you want to move on to an FLT course, all you have to do is ask the managers and they will try and their best, I'm sure, to put you through that training so that you can get that FLT license for you and take it away with you, basically forever, really. If do you want to, some companies do offer you management courses if you are interested in those. And like I said, if you want to move on from department to department, all you have to do is ask the managers and they will gladly train you on those, because the best sort of employee in a warehouse is a multi-skilled person that can just be moved anywhere and everywhere, wherever you need to. But obviously progression, it is quite difficult. To give you an example, when I worked in Tesco, I had 3 managers and all 3 of them had been in the business for over 10 years. I mean, one of them was 14, the other one I think was 17, and the other one had been in it for 30 years, which is absolutely insane. But it is also a good, it is also a very positive thing, which means that the business has not made them leave because they are able to provide them with what they need, the salary, benefits, the workplace environment, that kind of thing, the structure, the equipment, all of that is there. So that means that they stay instead of moving on. What I did personally is I gained the experience in the warehouse and then put that experience in my CV across with some knowledge that the managers were able to give me. And then I moved on to applying for external roles, and then I got the job in a place that I'm currently working in as a management in the management team. So that's what I personally did. So I apologize, I can't really help you too much in the development or progression side of it. If you are scared about doing the same thing every day, like I said, all you have to do is communicate with your manager, and I'm sure they will gladly train you everywhere else. So in terms of progression, that's pretty much it. There's not much else I can say, I'm afraid. If you do have some advice or some suggestions for other people, please do drop a comment, and hopefully they'll be able to see it. So for this video, that's pretty much it. I am going to leave what would you be doing on part number 2, just because it's been 16 minutes already. So if you are interested, I will leave the link in the description for part number 2 in the second. And please drop, so please follow that if you want to see that video. If you found this video any sort of helpful, please do drop a like. And if you are interested in this kind of content or interested in just hearing me blabber about things, please do drop a subscribe. And I will see you guys later. So I'll see you on part 2. See you guys. Thank you. Bye.